I feel like I remember them all. They're part of my way of thinking. For instance, I remember 1980s McDonald's. A lot of innocent people died that day too. Luby's Cafeteria, Texas. Fairchild Air Force Base, Washington State. Connecticut. Aurora, Colorado. Virginia Tech, Fort Hood. And now I will remember Umpqua Community College, Oregon. What do all these have in common? You know. A mass murderer using a firearm decides to prey on innocent civilians, starts mowing them down with gunfire. And I remember those mass murders. They form my way of thinking, and it is a foundation here in the Nutnfancy project. I've talked about it lots. Some of that will come into play in this video. If I go back to that Stockton incident, it was very formative for me because I knew I would be a dad, and I thought to myself, how would I feel, first off, if I'm not there and my wife and my little baby are visiting that McDonald's or whatever restaurant that day, and said madman comes in and decides to shoot him in the face. I had a hard time thinking about that, and I felt very helpless as I went through that thought process. And akin to that was, well, what if you're with them? So you're there as your little family, little baby, wife, and you. Guy comes in with whatever gun he wants to choose, and you don't have a way to answer him effectively. I.e., you don't have a gun. What do you do then? Now, back in the 80s, I thought about this a lot, and it was very, again, formative for me. And I determined then that I just did not want to be, I just could not accept dying without a fight. I didn't want to be a victim. And more importantly, I didn't want my family to be a victim. And then my thoughts, and this is long before TMP, and then my thoughts extended to my fellow man. I was like, well, if you feel that way about your own family, wouldn't you feel that way about your fellow man? Granted, you may not know these people, but they have brothers, sisters, moms, dads, grandmothers, grandfathers, babies, just like you do. And I thought, and I've said this in previous philosophy videos, I thought, well, if I'm not there that day in that McDonald's in Stockton, dude comes in, starts shooting people, wouldn't I want another person who perhaps has a firearm? Maybe it's an off-duty police officer, maybe it's a civilian, and they stop that guy right then and they shoot him dead. Would you like that? And I thought to myself, absolutely I would. And I would thank that person with every fiber of my being for saving my family. That's when I decided to carry a pistol. All the time. I did. Sometimes legally, sometimes I just carried it. Why? Because of that thought process. Active shooter comes in. I'm right there. I'm in the immediate vicinity, like I've said before. My life's being threatened, so are the lives of all the people around me, and I want to help. I want to be a sheepdog. That's just the way I'm put together. Some aren't, and I don't fault people for that at all. I've talked about that very honestly. What's this video about? Well, it's my very honest, forthright attempt to see if there is a way to effectively stop these mass shootings, these mass murders. Some of which I've talked about in the past here in TMP over the years. Look it up. Go into my playlist, political philosophy videos. You'll see a ton there. And some of those I'm very fired up, like after the Fort Hood shooting. But most of those are concentrating on short-term, immediate solutions to the mass murderer, i.e. active shooter response. And I believe in all of what I've said in the years past. This video is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to attempt in some, I'm sure, inadequate way to address the real cause, perhaps a solution of why this keeps happening. Now, in years past, I've used the term protectionist. It's a broad term. It's an umbrella term. I made it up. And what it describes is an individual, might be a politician, might be a normal citizen, not in a position of power, but a voter, who for whatever reason does not believe in dangerous things. Could be a car, could be a motorcycle, could be a knife, could be a firearm, usually is a firearm. And they don't think that you are qualified to be trusted with it. Now, I think, again, I've been pretty honest in talking about these protectionists, what their motives are. And I really think, in broad terms, they're divided into two groups. The first group I've railed on pretty hard, and I will continue to do so. And they are the protectionists that really want disarmament for America. And I'm talking mostly firearms, but pretty much all dangerous things. They want to take them out of the hands of civilians, keep them in the hands of law enforcement and military only. They have an agenda, these people do, and they will use whatever news occurrence, mass shooting, whatever, to promote that agenda. They'll put a spin on it because they are after, in this situation, your guns. It's fact. You'll never convince me those people don't exist. They do. But I've also felt like I've been fair to the other half of the protectionists that are well-meaning. Now, granted, they're going to arrive kind of in the same place, but they're coming at it in two different ways. The other half of the protectionists will look at an incident like Umpqua Community College and they go, how do we prevent this from happening again? And they grapple with it. They have a hard time not blaming the device, the gun. Maybe they're not broad thinking. Maybe they're not critical thinkers, and they don't understand there's a lot more forces at play, that actually taking the gun away can never be done effectively, and it will actually lead to more incidents like this. But their intention, their motive is at least in their way of thinking, pure. There's a lot of people like this, millions and millions of people like this. They don't necessarily dislike you as a gun owner. They just don't like seeing the carnage, and they want to prevent it, and they will pretty much sign off on any measure that promises, doesn't necessarily deliver, but promises to do that. I have friends like this. I know them. We get along great. We have conversations. We enjoy one another's company. When it turns to dangerous things, gun control, right to self-defense, we have some serious disagreements. And I don't hold back when I talk to these people. I will tell them how I believe they're, erring in judgment. Doesn't mean I hate them, doesn't mean I dislike them. But in my way of thinking, in terms of freedom, I think they are equally dangerous as the dedicated disarmament protectionist. So the guy, gal who really, really wants to disarm you for political reasons, usually. I've talked about this before in other videos. I bring that up because I think that's an interesting foundation for the video, and it will allow us to springboard into a very meaningful discussion of why this keeps happening, the mass shootings. Let's take that other side of the protectionists, people who are well-intentioned, but they have no problems whatsoever in initiating universal gun registration and subsequently, like I've made videos on, confiscation. Why? For the greater good. Hey, we really trust you. We don't have a problem with you, but we really got to get the guns out of the hands of this guy. We don't trust him. He's crazy. He has mental issues. Now we're going to catch some innocent people in the process, and you may lose your guns. So sorry, but for the greater good, this is how we're going to attach it. This is how we're going to attack it. It won't work. Let's go back to somewhat the facts of this latest shooting, Umpqua Community College in Oregon. Dude, and I'm not even going to say his name, goes in, kills kills 9 people, injures another 9, subsequently taken out himself. And again, these facts may change, the numbers may change, but the incident is known at this point. It's a couple days after it's happened. And we look at that and we go, that's awful. How do we prevent it? Like I've said in previous videos, and I'm going to concentrate first on short-term, and then I'm going to talk about long-term prevention or preventative measures that we can attack, maybe use. And I will make it as real and truthful as I possibly can. The response now is very predictable, right? The disarmament protectionist is going, aha, we told you so. This is what happens. We tried to pass meaningful gun legislation after Sandy Hook, and you guys shot it down, and now this keeps happening. They're doing that to further a disarmament agenda. And they do have an agenda. They will use whatever they can, exploit whatever event they possibly can to manipulate public opinion and get the votes they need to take your guns from you. Likewise, the well-meaning protectionist will look at them and they'll listen. They go, well, no one else is putting forth a better idea. I sign off on that too. I will vote for that. I will vote for politicians who are for that. I think we're going to have, and I think it's going on already in the United States of America, we're going to have a big division on gun rights. And it's going to be kind of a philosophical war. And I'm just talking philosophy, voting, peaceful resistance, and that's all I'm talking about, and that's what I advocate. On one hand, we have these protectionists that say we want to make society safer, and we don't care how ugly we have to get politically to do it, and we will get into your personal business to take your guns away from you eventually. They won't come out and say that now. They're going to do it incrementally. Registration, confiscation. I think if you're watching this video to this point, you probably know that. On the other hand, we have freedom lovers. We have sheepdogs. We have what I think are normal Americans. These are good people. They're families. They're individuals. But they believe in their right to self-defense. They believe in their right to dictate their own destiny. And they think when things go really, really bad, that a firearm is that insurance policy. And it's my right to have it. You cannot take it away from me. I'm a good person. I'm not the one doing these shootings. Don't come to me. Don't point your fingers at me and act like I'm the bad guy. I fall into that camp, by the way. I think most of y'all do too. There is a really cool thing, by the way, that's happened in the last, well, since I've been doing TMP, the last 9 or so years. And it started in social media. I was on the cutting edge of this in the Nutnfancy project, and I started way early, 2008, 9. I posted very honest, hard-hitting videos. Social media has, and it's not just social media, it's another thing I'll talk about here in a second, has converted a lot of people. It's opened their eyes. That no longer are people getting their information through ABC, NBC, CBS, the old media, newspapers, where it's controlled, and it has an agenda, and it is a certain message that has been approved by the corporation that owns that media. That went on for decades in the United States. Lo and behold, here comes the internet, blows that wide open. Now there's a huge interchange of ideas, thoughts, philosophies, much of it good. And along with that interchange was the pro-freedom message of firearms ownership. So I started the Nutnfancy project, and then over the years, a lot more gun channels have come out of YouTube. And in this term, it is a great thing because that message is spread even further. Gun blogs, websites. And coupled with that, and this is very fascinating, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, but it's good in the term, or in the sense that it's helping the fight, video games that are able to reach out and affect millennials, young folks, and get them interested in guns. For whatever reason, they see a scar in a video game, they like it, maybe they airsoft a little bit. When they turn 21, maybe they save, and they go buy one and they really like it. And then someone tells them, hey, by the way, that gun's going to be made illegal. Someone's going to take it away from you. You don't have the right to have it. and maybe they bounce into YouTube, they watch some of my videos, some other videos that are very pro-freedom message videos, and they start forming their thoughts about, hey, this is constitutional, I have the right for this gun. You know what? I'm going to join the NRA. I'm going to vote accordingly. That has happened. And it is a very good thing. So these two factions are like this. They are opposing each other. But on the good side, the pro-freedom people, myself included, there's a lot of us. A lot more than there were just 10 years ago. Thanks to, like I said, social media. Not just YouTube, but all social media. The internet as a whole. And then I would throw in video games there. Because it turns these young folks on to guns. That's not enough by itself, by the way. Hey, you're a gun enthusiast. How many people do we know like that? Hey, I have this gun, I have that gun. Are you politically active? No. Do you join the NRA? Nope. GOA? Nope. Well, you're part of the problem. Because they're going to come for that gun sooner or later. They don't like that you have it, speaking of guns. Just because I have this on the floor from the previous video. Tavor. Hey, you shouldn't have that Tavor. It's an assault rifle. Well, first off, it's not an assault rifle. It's a semi-automatic sporting carbine with a normal capacity magazine. Thank you. And yes, I should have it. Constitutionally protected. What's going to happen after this latest mass shooting? Well, a couple things. First up, the sensitive human being from whatever political faction you may come from, we feel bad. Innocent people died. And we feel a lot of the sheepdogs, whether you're talking pro-Constitution law enforcement, good civilians that carry concealed, they're like me. They're primarily choosing to carry either off-duty or in their personal lives to intervene in a mass shooting, an active shooter incident. That being said, I posted a video in July. It's called How Not to Be a Jackass When Carrying a Gun. And in that, I really stressed the very serious decision about getting involved as a civilian, how you could be mistaken for the bad guy and taken out by the responding law enforcement coming to the incident. And how you have to use and exercise very good judgment in whether you get involved or not. It's not a simple decision. It's a very serious decision. Maybe the incident will be so cut and dried, like it was for Nick Milley in Oregon. At the mall shooting, he used a Glock 40 to stop that mass shooter in the mall. It wasn't covered by the media because it doesn't play into their narrative that a concealed carry permit holder can stop violence. The presence of guns can stop and have stopped violence. These factions are going to be at odds with each other. And I was talking about the predictable outcome. We're going to see probably King Obama, President Obama put forth some executive orders. Doesn't like the way things are going, that's fine. I'll do yet another executive order curtailing your Second Amendment rights. A lot of this has been in play for a number of years because he was allowed to be reelected. We have other politicians who support him, and I was frankly shocked in 2013 when we turned back the tide of Sandy Hook. I was shocked. I mean, I put out a series of videos. No one else was. I called all the gun channels into action, and thankfully they responded. And other social media sites responded, and there became a huge growing uproar and resistance and letter writing campaign to oppose it. And TMP was part of that, a small part perhaps, and we turned back the tide. I think we're going to see that again. I think we will. So if we take that predictable outcome, they're going to do whatever they can to bring back, in my opinion, and that's all it is, probably not worth much, universal gun registration. They would really like that. And then later on, when the next mass shooting happens, then they'll say this wasn't enough. We need to go farther, and we need to start, sorry guys, taking away your semi-automatic guns. Oh wait, that's not enough. Pump action shotguns. Oh wait, that's not enough. Every gun, eventually. Or do like England does, they'll have a very highly restricted firearms ownership policy. Maybe your guns are locked up at a police station. And you can go there and check them out and fondle them in a safe or something. What do we do politically in preparation for what's coming? First up, like I've said in past videos, and I said this in 2012, December of 2012, with the Sandy Hook shooting, if you are a freedom-loving individual, you should be in the NRA. You should have a membership for at least 3 years at a stretch, not 1 year. That's too fast. What's going to happen is going to expire, and then you'll get busy. You'll mean to, but you won't renew it. Preferably a life membership. I think I'm a patron member at this point in NRA. I'm also a life member of Gun Owners of America. You should at least join one of those. I like them both. I think they both do great work. I think the NRA definitely has the larger voice. An imperfect voice, I've talked about that. They're not perfect on every issue, but dang, they've done a lot of great work, especially their legislative arm, the NRA ILA. And you should give generously to that as well. Why? Because there is another political fight coming. I've said this for years, and I think it's going to be here pretty soon. You do have some middle-of-the-roaders between these two factions, so the protectionists, the freedom-loving people. There's some middle-of-the-roaders and a lot of them, and they really don't have an opinion on this, and you can influence those people in voting. That's where radio ads from the NRA ILA come into play, that they'll explain to something, hey, this is what's going to happen. I've said in previous vids that there's a lot of people who don't own guns that fully support your Second Amendment rights. They like the idea that, hey, anytime I want, I can go out and buy an AR-15 here in the United States of America. And it should be that way. They dig that. And good on them. They don't own any guns, but dang, if you try to take their rights away from them, they'll vote accordingly. These are the people we need on our side to influence, to be open-minded with, to be kind to, and perhaps influence them to preserve our rights. So the political battle is definitely coming. Get ready. Now, if you don't subscribe to my Twitter feed, Nutnfancy Twitter, please do so. Because that is a very quick and easy way for me to activate the troops. Right? That if something happens, maybe we do a letter writing campaign, let's do it. We're very early in the 2016 presidential race. I don't really have anyone that I could point to and go, yeah, this is a person I'd like. I have several I do like, and I'll actually be reading from some. Not that I'm supporting them, but what they're saying is right in line with the message that I wish to deliver here. Now, as we get closer, will I come out and make a presidential support video? I don't know. I don't think I can influence this one way or another. I can influence a tiny, tiny, tiny corner of the internet called the Nutnfancy Project. That's about it. But a political battle is coming. So get ready. NRA, ILA, GOA, give generously to NRA, ILA for radio ads and everything else. We're talking about immediate solutions to a mass murder. At least we were. And I took a side road to talk about the political ramifications. So we're in that situation, and let's say we were smart that day and we actually did carry our pistol, and let's say our concealed carry pistol that day is a Glock 26 and a shoulder holster. And why do we carry it? Because we have such a streamlined everyday carry system. It's our habit pattern. Why do you think I do gear checks on my guys? Because of this. Because I look at your system, I go, if your system isn't working, maybe I can help you with it. Maybe it's too cumbersome, it's uncomfortable, and you leaving the house that day, you go, yeah, I just can't wear this 1911, I can't wear this gun, the holster doesn't work. A lot of airtime spent here in TNP on that. So we're on the campus that day, and we hear the shots. And let's say you're not an off-duty law enforcement person, you're a civilian, and you hear what's going on, and you quickly ascertain active shooter. Did you know there was a person on campus who was carrying that day? Now, I was tempted initially to call Umpqua Community College a free fire zone because it is a college's policy to not have firearms on campus. However, the state of Oregon does allow it. And concealed carry permit holders could have had guns that day on campus legally overriding their private policy. And this person was on campus that day, carrying, and he heard the shots. And let me see if I have the summary. Here we go. A veteran who says he was carrying a concealed weapon on the UCC campus Thursday when 26-year-old blah 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 went on a murderous rampage. He says he didn't intervene because he knew police SWAT team members wouldn't know him from the shooter. Hang on. I know you guys are lit, but just relax, please. In an interview with MSNBC, vet John Parker said he knows a lot of students who conceal carry at the school because despite a school policy to discourage weapons on campus, Oregon state law does allow it. Like we were talking. Parker explained that his military training provided him with the skills to go into danger, but he felt lucky that he and others didn't try to get involved going after the shooter. He says, luckily I made the choice not to get involved. I was quite a ways from the building where this was happening. And he says we, but I'm just going to put I there. And I could have opened myself up to be a potential target, not knowing where SWAT was or what the response time was, and not knowing who we were. Had I had my gun ready to shoot, he would have thought I was one of the bad guys. What would you have done? Really think about that question, by the way, because it's really easy to be flippant about it and just go, well, I would have done this. I would have ran towards a gunfire. I would have been Johnny Sheepdog. I'll put the focus on me. What would you have done, Nutnfancy? I probably would have investigated. I probably would have gone towards a gunfire. I've said that on camera before. Who knows in the heat of the battle, but that's what I think now. Going back to that Stockton, California decision I made many decades ago. Going back to that fatal accident in the canyon when that woman was beheaded from the auto accident and the children were laying there bleeding to death and no one would go there to help them. Everyone was crowded around, afraid. Go watch my video, A Story of First Aid, and I give you all the details of that story then. I was 18 years old at the time. That's why. To help, to serve my fellow man. That's what I would have done. That being said, like I said in that previous video, it is a very serious decision, and I do not necessarily blame this guy. And I don't think we should. We weren't there. We didn't see what he saw. He has a very valid point that he could have been mistaken as the shooter himself. I think a rational person will get that. I think most of the viewers of this video, in some way, however, and I'm just going to be totally honest, will fault him for not trying, for not doing something to help. It is what it is. Like I said, when I strap my gun on, I'm strapping it on for that incident, active shooter. For me, kind of. Usually I can flee the situation. I can talk my way out of it. Or I'm living enough in the yellow where I can see it coming and avoid it altogether. An active shooter is a little bit different. It can happen without any warning whatsoever. Boom, there you are. You look left, you look right. I'm the only one here that can stop this. You have a split-second decision of what you're going to do. Immediate response to the situation. Now, our protectionist friends will say, guns won't solve the problem. This would have happened anyhow. And I highly disagree with that. If you're going to solve the problem instantly, it's going to be solved with a gun. Lo and behold, this shooter was killed with a gun. Right? What do police arrive with? Steno pads? Clipboards? A bullhorn? Billy clubs? No, they have tactical carbines. They have pistols. That's how the situation is handled when you don't have time. Someone's killing people. Can't really talk about his feelings. Why are you doing this? Because he's pulling the trigger on innocent civilians. You're going to have to act, and you're going to have to make some hard decisions and probably take the guy out. There are situations when maybe you can use non-lethal. They're rare from what I'm seeing, especially now when law enforcement has seen this active shooter protocol happen over and over again, and they've trained for it. They are faster in their response times. A lot of departments, including college campuses, have a protocol, again, to handle active shooters. They're getting good at it. That being said, they may not be around. And again, my facts are imperfect. I think it was an unarmed security guard that was in the building at the time when this shooter started popping rounds. So when the protectionists say guns won't prevent the loss of life, that's a lie. When they say we can get rid of all guns and this will stop happening, that's a lie. You will never get rid of guns. You'll never get rid of weapons. If that were the case, why are prisons still experiencing murders? There's no guns there, right? And yet still people die. You know, they'll make a shiv out of plexiglass, out of a melted toothbrush, and they'll just jam it into some dude. Happens every day in penitentiaries around this country. You can't stop it, especially with 3D printing. Come on. You know, you think you're going to stop gun ownership, you could just make it illegal tomorrow and it would still proliferate. Might go up in price, might move to the black market, still there, and the bad guys will always be armed. Technically speaking, Umpqua Community College, perhaps in the very legal sense, was not a free fire zone, but in the known sense, the popular sense, it really was. Because from what I understand, and I could be wrong, it was very public about not wanting guns on campus. And there are people that would abide by that. Even concealed carry permit holders, they go, well, if the campus doesn't want it, I'm going to leave my gun at home today. I don't want legal problems. And I bet you a lot of people live that way on campus, even though technically they could carry. Let me ask you this. Would we be talking about all of this had that guy, let's just say in a perfect world, everything works out, he's not mistaken for the bad guy, he responds with his Glock 26, I don't know what gun that guy had, and he caps the bad guy. I don't think he's going to get there before said bad guy has killed people. I've always said that. If someone wants people dead, they're going to do it. And by the way, they don't need a gun. They can use a wide variety. I don't even want to list them. A wide variety of destructive weapons to kill their fellow human beings. Sadly, they can get very creative and have all over this world, not just in the United States. But let's say he responds. Guy shoots 2 people and then he stops the bloodshed, pops the guy right in the head. Triple taps him, 2 to the chest, 1 in the head. Do you think the media would cover that, by the way? If they did, it would be very quiet because it doesn't fit their disarmament agenda for the United States. You know, I think with social media, it couldn't be hidden and we would have found out about it and we would have publicized it ourselves. But what a different outcome that would be. In that fictitious example, at least 7 more people would be alive, and at least, let's just say 7 wouldn't be severely injured. What stopped that? Did it walking up and talking about feelings? No, a gun. A gun stopped it. So I will lay a lot of blame at that community college and any other private or government entity that does not just allow, but welcome concealed carry permit holders on their premises. IKEA comes to mind. IKEA is a gun-free zone. Don't bring guns in here, says IKEA. Aurora, Colorado, the theater shooting, same way. Don't bring guns in here. And I think to a large degree this mass shooter said, you know what? The chances of me running into guns on UCC campus, not very high. And so he did what he did. You won't hear that message from the protectionists. They won't sign off on it. Ever. They don't believe it. They think they can create a gun-free zone. It will prevent this, and it's a falsehood. It won't. If it did, why did all these other shootings happen? A lot of the ones I started with at the intro of this video were gun-free zones. Free fire zones. Go look up that video I put out years ago. They invite these crazy people. They're going to come to you and say, hey, the gun purchasing process is broken. We need to get into your medical records. You watch, that's going to happen. We need to really take a look at you, and we, the government, state, local, federal, will make a decision on whether you can own a gun. Kind of like the Lautenberg Amendment. You wait, that's going to come. And I bet you a lot of Americans support that. They go, well, it's the only way we can be sure. You remember those well-intentioned protectionists? Immediate response is an armed response that will solve it. You know, ideally there's an off-duty police officer right there. He or she is trained. We've seen that before. Fort Hood incident was stopped by a female officer. She did a great job. I think she was wounded in the process. I'm sorry, not Fort Hood. Another Colorado shooting. And I might be getting those juxtaposed. But an officer response is ideal. Big decision. Do I get involved? Do I not get involved? I can't answer that for you, nor will I. You have to make a judgment call. Every situation is different too, and like I said, I don't know if I would condemn this dude. I'm kind of neutral. Kind of. If you push me, then like I said earlier, I would kind of wish that he would at least tried. And I remember when I posted my video on the Aurora, Colorado shooting, you know, some comments will go, well, there's no way a concealed carry permit holder could ever save any lives there. And I disagree. Because if bad guy gets rounds just thrown in his general direction, his whole game plan changes. We've seen these guys, when they get shot at, they just turn the guns on themselves. They're cowards. When they are presented with gunfire, suddenly they wilt. And a lot of times they cap themselves right in the head. That's what happened in that Oregon Mall with Nick Melee. So I disagree. You put rounds on the guy, it changes his whole solution. And now he's going to concentrate on the concealed carry permit holder. And maybe the other innocent people can escape. Does, CCW holder die? Maybe. I said that in the France shooting video. Maybe he does. But that's a pretty good way to go out, don't you think? Trying to save your fellow human beings. I think that's a pretty good way. Every situation's different. Exercise good judgment. An armed response. Immediate solution. Now let's talk about long-term solutions to these mass murders. How do we stop the Stocktons, the Lubies, the Fort Hoods, the UCCs? We need to look to the family. We do. The American family is pretty much broken. There's a lot of young people growing up without dads, growing up without moms, growing up without value systems. Maybe they get a very warped value system from the media. Might be a video game, a very brutal, graphic video game. And that kind of molds the way they think. That has happened. Don't say it hasn't. I've kind of alluded to this in past videos. Maybe it's movies that do the same thing. They're friends, but since they don't have a very strong value structure, they don't have empathy with nature, with animals, and with other human beings because they weren't raised that way. They become unfeeling. They become coarse. They don't care. And a lot of these people fall into that category, and what do? Going out and shooting another human being in their way of thinking and say, okay. We have a lot of these people around, I think. Getting rid of guns is not the answer. You can't get rid of guns, number one, like I said. Even if you could, they're going to find other ways to do what they need to do. The long-term solution is the family. That we strengthen our families, we strengthen our value systems, whatever that is. But basically, let's boil it down into empathy for living things. That we let our little children, and I just tweeted this tonight about free play in nature. We let our little children free play in nature to play with frogs, toads, to see nature, see deer, go out into the creek, make a little dam with rocks, to get outside, to experience the world. And when we experience the world, a funny thing happens. We see suffering. We experience suffering. We experience being cold, hungry, uncomfortable. Backpacking, for instance. We experience the interaction with nature. We see kindness. Maybe we see a little baby fawn. And I'm not trying to be overly sensitive or ridiculous, but a child experiencing these things cannot help but develop an empathy for all living things, to include his fellow man. I told you I was going to read a quote, and this is it. GOP 2016 contender Bobby Jindal, and I'm not going to say like I'm a Bobby Jindal fan, but I like what he writes here. In a blog post, wrote the following: that the United States, the mass shootings experienced in the U.S. are a symptom of deep and serious cultural decay in our society. The Louisiana governor writes that America is in a vicious cycle when it comes to mass shootings like the one in Oregon last week. Another week, another mass shooting, another press conference by the president lecturing us on the need for gun control. There's that predictable response that I talked about. And now Hillary and Obama are in a race to see which of them can be the most extreme in trying to destroy the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Rinse and repeat. I'm still quoting, by the way. This is Bobby Jindal. You will be impressed by what he's saying here. I surely am. These shootings are a symptom of deep and serious cultural decay in our society, he explains. These acts of evil are a direct result of cultural rot. It is the cultural rot that we have brought upon ourselves, and then we act like we are confounded and perplexed by what is happening here. Citing examples of the cultural rot, Jindal notes that popular entertainment is now a continuous stream of grotesque killing of every kind imaginable. And that's just not video games. Like I said, it's a lot of movies. A lot of TV shows. You know, it kind of desensitizes these young folks that don't have a value system, that don't have, more importantly, a very strong male role model. Very important. An anchor to these young men, to these kids. We devalue human life. We have no regard for the sanctity of human life in any regard, from the unborn to the old to every single person in between. We devalue it and act as if we almost have no regard for humanity, he writes. Observing the cultural influences on boys in particular, Jindal explains the popular music denigrates women, while video games celebrate murder. This is him, quoting again. Our families are a complete mess. We have raised tens of millions of young boys who never become real men because they have no values whatsoever. They have no truth in their lives. They have no regard for common decency. Oh, we make sure we stop them from bullying at school, but we are completely fine with them watching people get murdered and raped on the internet after school. And we are willing to let them go to the basement and join a fantasy world where they pretend they are killing people for 2 hours after school. Wow, that's hard hitting. And who is it that generally commits these evil acts of mass murder that are becoming routine? It's almost always the young men who have either no father figure in their lives or a broken relationship with their father. Is this just a coincidence? Is this just a coincidence? Of course not. That mass shooter at UCC, his mom and dad were divorced. He had no strong male role model in his life, as far as I know. He was just kind of drifting in the wind. Maybe mom was working. Didn't really have a strong influence. And there's lots of great single moms out there that do have a very strong influence raising awesome young men. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you cannot downgrade or just neglect the effect of a very strong dad in the life of his young son. It anchors him. It gives him that value system. It teaches him accountability. The worst dude that you get in the military, and I'm a 21-year retired lieutenant colonel. I've seen all facets of the military, training myself, seeing it, being there. The worst candidate you get into training is a guy that did not have a strong dad. Often. Not always, but often. Sometimes he comes into training, he's totally entitled. He thinks the world is owed to him. He really doesn't have a strong understanding of how the world works. He doesn't have a work ethic. He's a crybaby. He complains. He doesn't know how to accept responsibility. He blames others. And that's a lot of work for that drill sergeant to correct, to bring him to grips with reality. Do they do it? Yeah, they do. Sometimes they can't. Guy washes out. Hey, dude, you're so broken. We actually can't use you here. U.S. Army, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force. See ya. Have a nice life. Been there. I've seen it. This is what he's talking about. He's spot on. This is truth. We're talking long-term solution to this mass shooting problem. We want to fix it. Fix the family. Fix the dad's involvement with these kids. And these dads need to be involved. They need to have a strong value system. They need to be a part of their boys' lives. They need to love their children first and foremost. These boys need to feel loved. They need to be accepted. They don't need... Their feeling of rejection, especially by a father figure, that can compound. It can alienate a person. And they feel like, well, I'm not accepted by my own dad. Now I don't feel like I'm accepted by society. Now I feel detached from society. Meanwhile, he's playing these video games or watching movies for hours on end. He becomes desensitized to everything. He never had that foundation of empathy. Maybe some mental problems come along, and now you have a situation ripe for what we are seeing. If you want to fix it long term, it's not going to come through some stupid gun law, national gun registration. That won't cure it at all. It's going to come through repairing the American family. Jindal's spot on. I totally agree with what he's saying. It's sad, really. Jindal says the cause of mass shootings is not guns, but the culture of death. He explains simply, garbage in, garbage out. We fill our culture with garbage and we reap the result. Meanwhile, the shallow and simple-minded liberals will continue to blame pieces of hardware for the problem. And they will long for the days before firearms were invented. Jindal adds, but the simple truth is, as long as we place no value on human life, as long as we glorify senseless violence and evil, we will get exactly the same result. I will stress, as long as we don't have fathers and functioning families involved with these people, we're going to get exactly the same results. Now, society's messages, I don't think, are going to change. You're not going to see Hollywood, for instance, stop their gory movies. You're not going to see video game companies suddenly say, you know what, we're not going to have violent video games anymore. I don't think these things are going to change at all. If anything, they're going to get worse. However, a strong family can protect a child from this. It can teach a child, like I've done with my boys, how to handle it. For instance, my kids, I've never shielded them from it. I just say, hey, this is what it is. This is how we believe as a family. This is how we believe in treating our fellow man. And you give them a value system. And dads and moms do that by example, first and foremost. They look to you. How do you act? How do you treat people? Are you empathetic with your fellow human beings? Raise your hand if you're imperfect in this. I am. You are. But we generally, if we connect the dotted lines as parents, hopefully, we're trying. We're angling up there. And our kids notice that. And they go, Dad's not perfect, but, he holds me accountable for my behavior. I know he loves me. He helps the neighbor. He pulled over the other day, helped that person alongside the road. He rescued that dove. He loves animals. He's really kind to my dog. And having pets, by the way, is a great way to teach empathy to your little children. You should have a dog. You should have cats, and you should be kind to them. Be great pet owners. And your little boys, your little girls will see that, and it will give them that foundation of empathy for living things. It makes me wonder how many of these mass shooters had a dog from a good family and they were taken care of. That animal. I'll tell you, there's anomalies. There's people that come from great families, great value systems, and they still go off and do crazy, murderous things. There's no guarantees. But if, again, we look at the preponderance of evidence, if people have a strong value system, that they're kind and empathetic with their human beings, you're going to see this decrease. That's the solution, guys. I mean, that is the long-term solution. I've never really discussed it before in a video. It's time. I haven't changed as far as my approach to being a sheepdog. I believe in being armed. I walk around every day armed. I believe the immediate response to save lives will be armed intervention up to and including said bad guy getting killed at the point of my gun. Hard decision, use judgment, like I said, but I like the option. I don't like not having options. Like I said at that Stockton example, just sitting there unarmed, or I'm not there at all to defend my family, it keeps me up at night. It will you too. You love your little girls, you love your little boys, you love your wife, you love your girlfriend. That's probably why you pack a gun too. Can this be solved? Can we stop the mass murders? I think we can, but it takes a resolute response, like I said, to fix the root cause. And I hit it hard in this second half of the video. We've got to have dads involved with their little boys, loving their little boys, taking them on outings, making memories with them, imparting a strong value system by example and teaching. Moms too. Functioning families. One of the most gratifying aspects of the Nutnfancy project is I get to see you guys. That I get to meet you personally. And I get to see that process and play with you guys. You know, I met a lot of your families just a few days ago. We had a great get together. I saw little girls, little boys with moms and dads. I mean, a lot of families. I've never seen that many families come to a Nutnfancy gathering before. And I was like, so happy. I told my wife about it, Mrs. Nutton. She's like, that is so cool. And I was like, I know. And so I think the people who watch this video from start to finish are going to be TMPers. Maybe a lot that aren't. Subscribe. This is what we talk about here. Yeah, we'll review guns, we'll review knives, we'll talk about systems for these good guys. We'll have fun, we'll be silly, and we'll be super serious at times, just like life. Just like this video. You're not going to watch another video like this on this shooting anywhere in the world. I don't care, on any media outlet, any other channel in YouTube. You'll see it here in TMP. I'm humbled to be able to have this. I am. I'm humbled that I have TMP to, in some small way, maybe make a difference. You know, and it pains me just like it does, I think, all feeling human beings when something like this happens. And we do ask ourselves, we go, hey man, I would love to bring an end to this carnage. In that respect, we have a lot in common with those well-meaning protectionists. Maybe not the disarmament ones. They totally want to take your guns, all your dangerous stuff. But there's a lot of good people. They mean well. They just need education. Taking the guns away will not solve this problem. Disarming good people who could intervene and save lives will not solve the problem. We've talked about what will. And I truly, truly believe it would solve this problem. But it takes work, and it takes having a goal to be good parents, to have an influence in our children's lives. This is TMP. Thank you very much.